Your mic?
Oh, I'm not loud enough. Thanks. Okay. So Finance Committee meeting, March 13th to order. It's 8:30. Do we have a roll call?
John Regheimer? Is that you virtual? I don't know. Stacy Hessel?
Here.
Mark Helwig?
Yeah.
Tom Duffy? Jeff Haney?
Yeah.
You have a quorum?
All right, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have the certification of compliance with the open meetings law?
This meeting was noticed to the public and the news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. Can I entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion made by Helwig, second by Duffy. All in favor? Aye. Public comments. At this time, members of the public will be given the opportunity to address the committee. Please adhere to the following when addressing the committee. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less per individual. Comments should be directed to the committee as a whole and not directed to individual committee members. The committee cannot respond to your comments during this time. Please sign in and fill out all public comments on the sheet if you wish to speak. We have nobody in the audience. Is there anyone online that would like to speak at this time? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to number 7. Consider approval of meeting minutes from February 13th.
213.
Motion by Helwig, second by Duffy. Sorry, Jeff, we'll get you in there. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, minutes approved. Treasurer's report.
The deadline for filing the February settlements with the tax jurisdictions that ended on February 7th. All the payments were received by the county in the total sum of $7,317,569.50. And all of those settlements were sent to the DOR and approved. Spring publications notice were ran both February 14th and 21st. The following statement, this is the interim process. The publication marks the beginning of the tax foreclosure. As that little chart that I added there, you can see there was 43 delinquent tax parcels that were paid after we sent those out. The 2024 lottery and gaming first dollar credits were filed and completed by February 26th. And all the 2024 late lottery applications are now sent to the Department of Revenue.
Great, thank you.
Any questions?
All right, thank you. Number 9, Finance Department report.
All right, I know this packet looks really big. We will not go through everything page by page, but I'll give you the highlights of everything. Starting with sales tax, February was down a little bit from last year, but January and February combined are still very strong. We're on pace for 3.5 million. Not that I'm anticipating that, but we have a good start for the year. Any questions on that? All right. Moving on to budget performance from 24. We still have a few things to wrap up, but the vast majority of it is in there now. We'll have some minor adjustments. I just want to go through kind of some highlights here. Sales tax revenue, we came in 159,000 over budget, which is good. Also on the revenue side, we got some non-taxable tribal land. That was a payment we weren't expecting. So that was about 90,000, put us ahead of budget. Stumpage came in great, over 800,000 over budget. So that was a wonderful year for stumpage. And also interest on investments continued to be very strong, about 550,000 over budget. The one thing we did not do is have to draw that from fund balance. We had budgeted 750,000. So that's kind of subtraction from overage of revenues. But for the year, the general fund is about $9,000 over budget. Moving on to some of the departments, I'm going to highlight ones that did well. Circuit Court was 110,000 over on the revenue side. Register of Deeds about 128,000, and zoning about 87,000, and finally sheriff 74,000. So those were the ones that exceeded budget expectations, and that put the general fund even without subtract or drawing that 750,000 that was budgeted. We ended up being 787,000 over budget on the revenue side, about 4%. Well, very strong year. Some departments did great, and some of our general fund stuff did great. So then on the expense side, we budgeted $750,000 transfer to HHS. We have not done that yet. Well, I'm going to bring that up later with recommendations for what to do with surplus. Other things that did well, Sheriff's Department was about 437,000 under budget, and ambulance 316,000 under. They're also under on the revenue side, so it kind of offset. But the expenses came in under budget about 1.65 million, which gives us a surplus right now of about 2.4 million. And like I said, we still have a few things to clean up, a few little grant revenues coming in. We're still getting some invoices to pay, but for the most part, we're wrapped up. Then moving on to HHS, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I've got a kind of a analytical sheet to look at later in the meeting. But right now we're sitting at a deficit of 1.566 million, and we'll have to make that up to, and that's where a lot of the fund balance surplus is going to go. Or not the fund balance surplus, but the surplus from 24. And then highway, they're really right at a break even right now, but we have not booked depreciation yet. So I know that they'll have a bit of a deficit. And that will be addressed in some of that surplus movement later. Any questions on 24?
Mark, did you have a question?
No, I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody
then-
else? Okay.
Moving on to 25. Very early yet, we're about 17% in. Every month is about 8.5%. Nothing is surprising yet. Revenues, we haven't taken in a ton. On the expense side, the one thing that always sticks out right now is Department 33. And that is because we pay all of our stuff, most of it in January. All of the partner organizations we support are paid out in January, including libraries, Nemacoggin Transit, Senior Resource Center, the Lakes Alliance, all that stuff is paid out in January. So that always runs way ahead early in the year. So for the year, our expenses are running a little high, but I'm not concerned about that at all because of what I just mentioned. Health and Human Services, revenue is low, which we would expect. We have to spend the money, then send in either a grant claim or Medicaid for a lot of the money. So that always runs a little bit behind. Expenses are running a small amount under for right now, which again makes sense because we, for instance, our out-of-county placements, we haven't been invoiced for those yet for January or for February. So that would be running a little bit below right now. Highway, kind of the same story. Our revenues are actually decent for this time of year, and then expenses are low, but we're in the winter season. We haven't had to do much snow removal, so that's one factor there. Any questions on 25? Then moving on to CIP, we did not have a bunch of activity in February. Some IT stuff, and we did get that ambulance in January, and then we're just working on equipping that up. So a small amount went there. Any questions there? The next thing then is looking at what to do with the surplus from the general fund. So first, if you can make that a little bit bigger. So a given is going to be to designate the sales tax surplus as unassigned. That's something we established a couple years ago for years when we maybe run under budget on sales tax. So we're building up a little bit of an assigned fund balance there between the last 2 years. And then the next one is any profit from ambulance we put into an assigned fund balance. We use that to offset the levy in future years. So last year we had a little bit better of an assigned fund balance. This year it's smaller. We almost came out right on budget. So then moving into the next one, I'm going to talk about highway a little bit. I mentioned right now they're virtually right on budget. I think there's a $7,000 loss. We're going to be booking probably about $450,000 in depreciation. And then beyond that, highway has a very healthy fund balance overall, but a lot of that is due to equipment. So if we all of a sudden had to pay all of our bills at once, we'd actually have to sell equipment to do that. So our unassigned fund balance right now is about negative 300,000. I would like to clean that up. We've been kind of chipping away the last couple of years at that. So that if we did 750, that should cover both depreciation and the negative fund balance to get them cash neutral, which would be good. If you remember when April was here, she said every year on the books, highway has to borrow from the general fund to clear that out. So this would help with that. And then the next one is HHS. They ran a deficit of about 1.56 million, I believe. Like to transfer 1.3 from the general fund surplus to there so they don't have to eat into their own fund balance as much. They do have a healthy fund balance on their own, but the 2025 budget would eat up a lot of that if it went as planned. So this would allow them to keep some fund balance moving into 25, keep most of their fund balance. It's a little over 2 million right now. And then the final one, last month we approved the purchase of that temporary bridge. We're responsible for 85,000. Stumpage was way over for the year. So I would recommend taking 85,000 of that overage, putting that in the resource development to cover the cost of the bridge. So those are the 5 either transfers or assignments I would recommend. It comes out to a total of about 2.35 million, which would leave almost 100,000 fund balance in the general fund, surplus to go to fund balance in the general fund. And again, we do have some things that close out that may increase or decrease a little bit. Any questions on any of this?
I don't hear any, so
All right, so
Go
then
ahead.
moving on to the resolution. This would be a resolution to still maintain our general fund equal to or above our 25 to 30% level. Do the 2 assignments of fund balance, one to sales tax, one to ambulance, and then the transfers to the other funds of highway, HHS, and resource development for that total of approximately 2.35 million.
all right. So after that presentation, we're going to entertain a motion to approve the resolution to bring forth to the full board. And then we can discuss after we've made the 2 motions.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Jeff, second by Mark. Any discussion? No discussion? All right, all in favor of bringing the resolution to the full board? Say aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. We'll bring the resolution designating fund balance as appropriated here. That's okay. We have noises all the time in these meetings, so it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I wanted to get through that and have you pass it, and Mike would tell you this, out of the transfers that you just did, I mean, highway and the bridge project are, I would say, fairly routine to books. Health Human Services, though, and Mike has met with the staff over there, that's problematic if that continues. So it's a little bit back to where it was, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago for you, with you had overages because of adult out-of-county placements. This one is largely driven by youth now. youth justice area. We have kids at Lincoln Hills and out-of-county facilities. Now, some of those are court-ordered and will be ending this year, so there's a potential for that to go down. But if the trend continues with youth justice, you'll run into the same problems. But this year, we did budget more in the budget for that. So honestly, last year, there was not much budgeted because it had not been an issue. So just, Mike's keeping an eye on that, but that's largely where that's coming from for this last budget.
Andy, do you know how many kids we have out, like in Lincoln Hills and these other locations?
Let's see here, down here within your agenda, I think,
I don't know if it says specifically where they're at, but we will address that a little bit.
yeah, are you gonna go through that, Mike?
Yep.
Yep, when you get down there, there is a report in there that shows some of the placements.
Thank you. All right, moving on to number 10, department financial updates.
So this is where we're looking at a change. What the first one in A here, what I've got is a proposed report schedule. So instead of doing ambulance every month and then just kind of a general overview of everything else, we're going to dig in specifically to each of these departments. The reason this packet is so large is I did this retroactively, so we've got January, February, and March in this packet. So in January, I'm looking at ambulance, administration, finance, and HR. And then February, land records, surveying, zoning, and forestry. March, HHS, and child support. So I'm kind of trying to group them together in things that make sense. And then April would be ambulance again and highway. Ambulance, we would still do quarterly. Highway and HHS I've got in there twice a year. So that those are bigger departments. So we dig a little deeper into each of those twice a year. And then you can see from May forward, circuit court, criminal justice, family court, DA. June is general government, which would be that sub-fund 33. Airport extension. July, ambulance again, emergency management and medical examiner. August, county clerk, treasurer, and register of deeds. Those are all the elected ones that are kind of grouped together. September would be a second look at HHS and veterans then, and then October would be ambulance and highway again. November, maintenance and IT, which are kind of bigger subgroups of general government. And then December, take a look at sheriff and dog. So if that looks okay, that's what I will be presenting from now on.
I'm excited because I think that is what this committee is here for, is to see all those things. So thank you for doing that.
You bet. So with that said, we'll start digging in. Like I said, some of these won't take a long time, and then I'm not going to go through page by page either. But starting with ambulance, I do not have my normal prepared report. We talked about, and the committee seemed okay with going with more of the canned EMS MC report. So I'll spend more time on that. I've got a detailed income statement for both 24 and 25 here, which I won't spend a lot of time on. We talked about 24 quite a bit. They came in the profit of about 53,000. We just assigned that to fund balance, or made that an assigned fund balance. So it's kind of what the plan was. We are very early in 25. Revenues are at 11%. Expenses, I believe, are at 17, so right on target. We'll keep monitoring, and we will look at quarterly where we are with billings and collections. So that's this budget. We're probably going to be pretty close to right on the expenses, which means we're going to have to work hard to hit the revenue numbers. So we'll still keep on it. We just won't do a monthly update. So then looking at the EMS MC report, John, Randy, and I met with them 2 weeks ago. The representative came up to the county to meet us and kind of go through any questions we had. So it was good to go through the report and what each line means. I know it's a little bit hard to read, but a couple things I want to point out. Gross charges make sense. The trip count, yeah, that's how many runs we did. The gross charges are what we charged out for those accounts according to our fee schedule. So that contra allowance is what is negotiated down by either insurance or Medicare, Medicaid. And that balance, that is a deduction from the gross amount. That is not balance bid out to the recipient of the care. Balance billing is, okay, it's $1,000 bill, insurance is paying $700. We don't bill that $300 back to the person who received the ambulance service. So that is just kind of a lost amount right off the top. And it's roughly a third of the billing. So, we talk about collecting 50%. Well, we're losing a third off the top just from negotiations with the insurance companies. So that comes up to our net charges. That's what's actually we have billed out expecting payment. And then there's a small adjustment there, but then there are the payments that we've received month by month. And these are one thing I can't do, they can do, which is one of the reasons I like this report better. Those payments are tied to the charges. So there you can see month by month the percentage we've actually collected on those billed runs. The way I did it and why I always did a rolling 12-month average is I couldn't tie them back. So I was going month by month. And then over the course of a year, you get a good idea that way. So this is actually dollar for dollar of what was billed. And then you get to a balance due. And then way over at the right is the net collection. And one thing I want to point out, it looks like, hey, we're doing really good, and all of a sudden it's not so good. That's because this is tied to the run for that month. So the closer the month is to current, the less likely we're going to have revenue, because by the time it goes through insurance and everything, it's usually 3 months before you're seeing the money. So we're always going to want to look back 4, 5, 6 months to see what our true percentage was versus real current. And then the graphs on the bottom, I did ask why there's such a spike in average loaded miles, and she had to look into that. She didn't know. It's probably some sort of clerical error. But the one on the left there, you can see our trip count trend. So that is, the green bar is always going to be what the average is for the 12-month period we're looking at. And then the blue bar is that current each month individually. So kind of like you've seen before with different graphs I've given you. So it just shows pretty much we're staying where we are. We have some peaks in the summer months, which makes sense. We go from whatever 7,000 people around this area to 40,000, makes a big difference. So any questions on that first page? All right. Then moving on, this just breaks everything down by payer. We've talked a lot about Medicare, Medicaid are some of our big, where the payments come from. So you can see the percentage they pay. And with Medicare, the net collection is pretty high, but they have a higher contra allowance on the front end, because they will only pay so much per contract. These are something you can look through on your leisure. Insurance is the last one on this page, and it's a smaller amount. I mean, just compared to Medicare alone, you're looking at less than half of the billings. So we don't have a lot of private insurance. We have a lot of Medicare, Medicaid. The bottom of the next page is the patient, and that's actually so that would be self-paid. It's about the same as insurance over the course of the year, but their percentage of collection is much less. We're writing off much more there. And one thing she did mention is if the patient passes, it's usually a write-off. We're apparently not going against if there's a trust or family members or anything. So I'm going to skip a couple down to where the graphs are. And this is where our outstanding accounts receivable comes from. And you can see on the left, this is aging by percent, so most of it is current, about half. And then by category, you can see who the payers are. So the biggest one being Medicare Advantage is what's outstanding. So that is the EMSMC report. Are you okay seeing that quarterly along with the financial from ambulance?
That would be great.
Okay.
And then can you tell me, do you see more transfers than, I mean, just like when we were talking about this several months ago, I think, and how they're promoting to do the
Yeah.
transfers. Are you seeing that increase?
I did an update on that at the last meeting. I do that quarterly too. I haven't
Okay.
updated that since last meeting. To be honest, I can't remember if it was up or down from the one before.
That's okay. Maybe we just look at that to
Yeah.
make sure that we're
Didn't
working with
strike me
that.
that it went way up,
Okay,
not significantly.
yeah. But we're getting a communication level with our hospital better.
Yes, we're in much better communication with the hospital, and the key thing was that we're not fully staffed, but we filled all but one paramedic position as of last month.
Okay.
So we're still backfilling. We moved, 3 AEMTs became paramedics, so we were able to get them trained in with ours. They had to go through FTO training basically for a month. They were full-time now in February. We're backfilling their positions, so we're getting closer to fully staffed where we'll have 3 rigs available.
All right, great.
One of the barriers in the past had been availability, because we were having 3 staff on 2 rigs. Now we're trying to get to 2 on 3. Because what availability became an issue, because when they have a transfer, they want it now. If we're out on run, we can't do it. So we're trying to get our
Yeah, and
availability being
it's
better.
important for the hospital, for them to call on us, for us to be consistently available.
Yep.
And we did also change up, we incentivize people to be able to come in now if they're not working to do transfers as well.
Great. All right, thank you for that. Anybody else have any questions?
All right, moving on to an update on administration. For 24 first. 2 things I want to point out here, otherwise everything else is right where we thought it would be. We did add safety training in 24. It was not budgeted in the process in the fall of 23, but we felt it was important. For one reason, we were seeing a little bit of an increase in our workman's comp claims. We're doing some training on lifting and handling and all kinds of things. So that was about 16,000 that we spent in 24, had been unbudgeted, but we came in okay overall, easily okay, at about 92% of budget overall. And then the wellness initiative, which we started in 24 as well, it's gaining traction. We budgeted 25,000, we spent not quite half of that. That's things we're doing countywide. Another component of it is we set up a reimbursement program up to $20 a month or $240 for the year for either fitness equipment or gym memberships. Goal is try to get healthier, happier staff that are functioning, and also ideally it would lower some of our health claims later on. So we feel that's a really good investment to get some gains down the road. And like I said, it's been gaining traction. So we're happy with how it's going. We have a wellness committee. We meet every month. It's always this day in the afternoon. So we've got a meeting this afternoon. Liz puts out a wellness newsletter every month. And so I'm happy with it. We're about 1 year into it now and things are going well.
Great, thank you.
So then for administration for 25, obviously we're really early, so nothing's out of line at all either. The one thing you're gonna notice on all of these reports is the health reimbursement account. We fully fund those in January. It's not that the employee doesn't get that money. We're taking this as, we're writing it off as an expense, putting it in an asset account that we draw from as we have reimbursement claims through our HRA. Basically, an HRA is a form of portion of self-insuring. So if we didn't have that, our deductible would be, we'd have a lower deductible then because we wouldn't have that funding. So what we're taking a chance on is that the premium relief that we get going from a $1,000 deductible, say, to a $2,000 deductible is more than offset by because not everybody's gonna hit $2,000. So generally, it's about 40%, and you get, let's say we saved $300,000 in premiums for the county for the whole year. We might spend $150 on HRA reimbursements. So we're getting a net savings of $150,000, just in round numbers. So that's why we do that, but we do fund that right away. And then anything that's left over remains in that account, and we're using that now to when we have people retire and have a sick leave payout, that money is there for that too. So it's really helped our, which I don't talk about a lot, but our OPEB payment, which is our other post-employment benefit. We've more than cut that liability in half since Andy and I, because we've been able to, well, for one, we're expending it because people are retiring, but also building this fund up has helped a lot too. So, any questions on administration? Finance department, kind of same story. We came in under budget, but at 96% last year. A lot of the savings in all of these departments came in health insurance itself. We've done well. Since Andy and I got here, we had our 23 renewal was 2.5%. We had looked at double digits for several years prior to that. And then for our 24 renewal, we actually went backwards 5%. So they reduced our premiums by 5%. And then for 25, we got a flat, so we had no increase. So we've gone backwards 2.5% in 3 years, which is remarkable when the cost of care goes up about 7-8% annually. We've had a good run. We haven't had a lot of high cost claimants, but we had good data before too. You just need to push back and get a better renewal rate. So finance came in really well in 24, 25, same story. We're at 14%. So even with the higher health reimbursement payout already, we're still under budget of 17%. Any questions on finance? Moving on to human resources. For 24, we came in at 95% of budget. So no worries there. For 25, we're at 12% right now, so even lower. Haven't had to use professional services there yet, so that's part of why we're under budget there. Any questions on HR? Okay, moving on to land records. This one we came in at 97% of budget. Looks like we came in low on revenues at 68%, but that's only on $500, so we're not talking a significant amount of money. We're down $150 for the year, but expenses came in fine. For 25, they're a little bit ahead of budget only because they had to pay a software update already. They budgeted 30,000, they've spent over 19 already. So I put them a little ahead on budget, but no issues. They're not over budget, just ahead. Any questions there? Surveyor for 25, or 24, they were over on their individual revenues. They have revenue in the general fund and they have their own revenue within their fund. They're over on that about $15,000. They were a little bit over on expenses, and That's just due to a staffing change and a different insurance plan. Insurance makes a big difference on individual departments where you have 1 to 5 people in it. To go from someone who didn't take insurance to a family plan is a hit of about $25,000. So that does make a big difference. For 25, they're running right on budget now because I budgeted for that change in insurance, so they're fine. Any questions on surveying? Bless you.
Sorry.
Zoning then. As I mentioned, they did run quite a bit over on revenues, which is good. Means things are happening in Sawyer County. On the expense side, they were good, 92% of budget. So they had a big flip between overages on revenue and underspending. They came in over about $130,000. So they had a good year. Land and water is also a part of that. That one for 24, we have a grant claim that still has not come in. So we will, that will come out to about a wash in the end too, and we'll be good there. For 25, for zoning and land and water, not a lot of activity like everything else. Little under for revenue side, but under for expenses as well. Questions on zoning, land and water?
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. This is a lot. It won't be so this dry next month. We'll just have a couple departments to look at. Then forestry, stumpage does not get posted to forestry department. It's a general fund revenue, but they do have some aid that they get on their own. That's another one we have not collected yet. They get a grant. We have collected that. Their expenses, they were right on budget expense wise. They're showing a little bit under budget revenue, but like I said, we haven't received that state aid yet. And then they also do I put the ATV snowmobile grant projects in here. This one I know is not quite closed out yet. A lot of activity that still has to come in. Andy, that's mostly work we're doing for organizations, correct? And we're doing, a lot of this is work we're doing like for the snowmobile organizations. We're doing the grooming and stuff. Is that what the activity is or not? Or ATV?
We're the fiscal agent for the,
So we're the flow through.
yep.
Yeah.
So the Trail Alliance does the work, some of the work. Some of it we are, normally the state trail funding comes in through the forestry office and we work with the Trail Alliance who actually does the work. They might have their own crews do it and we flow through the money. Some of that work there, just as an advisement, like they're having, like all clubs are having a difficult time with manpower and being able to do the work. So they were actually starting to contract out some of the work, especially on the ATV trails for, people that have the equipment. And so I believe Greg's looking at changing that. So rather than having them contract for the work, we'll start contracting for the work just to take out that middleman. But yeah, for the snowmobile trails, ATV trails, we're the fiscal agent for the DNR funds that the clubs give us their reimbursements, we file them, get the money and funnel it back out to them.
So it's an important function for us up in Sawyer County.
Right.
Yeah, and there's
Um,
accountability, I would assume too. Yep.
Yeah.
Just to add, you're very lucky here to have a Trail Alliance. Many counties, you have 10 clubs and you have to work with each one of those to account for their expenses and revenues. Here, we have one group that we work with.
Yeah, much nicer. 25, not a lot of activity. No revenue yet. So then, now we're into HHS. And Liz, if you could skip all the way to page 120. I've done a summary of HHS, because this is, each report's about 36 pages, and we don't. Oh, well then go down to
I mean, do you wanna, okay, here, there's 36 pages in the first one.
Yep, then skip that one, go to the mental health one. If you're looking online, it was 120.
Mental health.
Yep. So this is a new report. This is a public document right out of the HHS report to public, or what committee is theirs?
HHS, this is part of their monthly report to the Human Services Committee.
So I just wanted you guys to see just kind of where some of the money is going. When we talk about out of county placements, that's what a lot of this is. It's mental health contracted. And it, you know, you can see it's a big number, like they're projecting 2.7 million. So that's, we're relying on services we don't provide to provide that care. And it's a big cost. And this is, like Andy had mentioned, 4 or 5 years ago, this is when this part had gone way over budget. And that was when the county had to put, I think, 1.3 million then into HHS fund balance to cover that. And, or no, was it 2 million even? Back in, from 21 surplus, it was 2 million. Yeah. So I'm just making you aware of this, and it's something we'll track. This is for 24, and pretty much everything should be closed out. There may be some small billings coming in, but it's a lot of money. And it's something we can't really control. But it's good for the finance committee to be aware of where some of the bigger ticket items are going in HHS. So any questions on that? Or what would you like to see differently from this? Maybe some comparative year by year data?
I mean, we could, I don't know, I mean, if there's no control, I don't know why we would have to see anything other than the year that we're working in, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think one of his slides coming up will give you a little bit more.
Yeah,
If you ever want to
I've got
see
some more
If you
detail.
want to see more detail on this specifically, HHS has improved their reporting to their committee. So they have included a couple slides in recent months that show some of the specific clients for these cases that show like just how much one person or like, I think they have a chart in their report that shows maybe the top 3 or 4 highest cost placements we have. Cause you look at like Trempealeau County or Winnebago, if we have people in there for long stints, so that it can run, I think it's at $1,500 a day now for those facilities. You're also seeing here, I'll just point out transitions, that they're making better use of that. I think that's the facility that we have here in Hayward. So we have some people there on a longer term basis now, that if they weren't there, they'd be out of county at a more expensive facility. But when you ever hear HHS talk about CSP, this is primarily the CSP portion of the operation. Community services. So community services and crisis. So like Northland Community Support, we contract with them to kind of oversee the CSP, and then now they're doing crisis as our new model with Joe Boda's retirement. So yeah, that's the biggest chunk of it. So they're a provider, so they actually meet with the individuals, provide counseling. You can tell some of these others are actually facilities where individuals are residents.
Transitions, Trumbull County and Winnebago, those are.
Facilities where people, yes. Yep.
Mhm.
So is Limitless Possibilities, New Beginnings, AFH is Adult Family Home, CBRF is a community-based residential facility. Tradewinds, we have somebody there now, that's a CBRF. So I guess I would just say like adult family homes, it's kind of a progressive, like how much care or freedom they have or ability to move about. Like if you're in Winnebago, you're there, you're not leaving, you're secure. But adult family home, you're probably a little more ability to move around and a little less care.
So the best effort would be to get a facility closer to Hayward or to Sawyer County.
Yep, that's the especially for anybody that has to go to Winnebago or Trempealeau or Mendota. Usually Mendotas are criminally held, but yeah, that's the resolution we passed a few months ago in support of establishing a facility. There were others, I believe, 3 beds in Ashland, which are almost
There's
never.
10 now.
There's a 10? Okay,
There's
sorry.
10. I was just in a meeting about this, and so there's 10 beds in Ashland, but
Those are the only ones.
those are the only ones.
Yep, there's nothing in the Eau Claire area anymore. So I think we are working on something in the Wausau area. But yeah, I mean, if you have to take somebody to Winnebago, that's a full day for transport. Do you have either one of our staff, or if we have to contract, we use, you see Talon and Ready Transports on here. That's a $1,500 trip.
But the daily cost, like this, wouldn't really change much if it was closer, would it?
Yeah, it could be more affordable, but yeah, it really, your savings is in the transport cost.
So that's in that big number there, the transport cost?
No, those are just the housing. If we
That's
have,
just the housing,
right,
right?
if we have to contract for transport, it's in here as Talon and Ready. Most often though, we try to use one of our own deputies or the Hayward PD to do the transport, and that does not show up.
Hmm.
All right, and then the next page is youth justice. As was mentioned earlier, this wasn't a big deal before, but now it is. We had 5 new referrals in December, and doesn't show where people are placed, it just shows, you know, the numbers right now. And we've got ongoing supervision. Out of home placements are 6, and that's not just December, that's for the, you know, what are actually there now. So for the year, we had 76 referrals. I don't know what numbers were before, but well, the next page, we're gonna look at some costs, and I'm sure it was much less than that according to that. But this was a need. It's one of those things where you hope it was a need, so we swung way over, and hopefully it levels a little more in the middle, so it's not quite so high cost, but we don't know. It's placements are placements, so.
Is there a reimbursement rate from the state that we get for assisting?
I don't know that for sure. If it's Medicaid eligible, yes.
Otherwise, we don't get any reimbursement from the state.
Some could be private insurance, couldn't they, Andy? Do-
Most of, a lot of the youth are not covered under that.
Yeah.
Adults, we do. They have access to private insurance, or there's
But I mean, just for even the youth justice program, we don't get any reimbursement?
there's a state allocation, I would call
Okay.
it. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions? You're moving right along, good job.
Sorry. This one we'll spend a little time on. So what I did is I took a few categories that kind of stuck out to me in HHS and did some analysis year by year. So the first one we'll look at is juvenile justice. You can see 19 to 22, we had very minimal cost. You know, the highest was $250,000 in any year, and a couple of them were right around 100,000. 22 was 100,000. We basically were spending very little on that. Well, then 23 is when we started changing how we were doing things, and it jumped up to 700,000. And you can see by the budget, the next column over, we budgeted 130,000, expecting a year similar to the prior year, and then changed what we did, and it went up. Well, then in 24 is when it really went up another 1.1 million.
Why is?
More placements and, you know, whether out of county or just in home, you know, in a foster home situation or whatever.
More you.
More kids in the program. I can't speak to that, if it's more youth issues or more recognition of maybe what was there.
Are you asking about youth justice?
Yeah.
How come there's such a big jump? My question is, I mean, was there more, all of a sudden, more issues with kids, that it went up from say like from 2022 to 23, almost 600,000 difference.
I have an
And then
answer, so-
jumped 20 to 24. What's the big jump, I guess?
This is my opinion,
Mhm.
but I could probably back up some facts. So when I started, we had some issues in that department in Child Protective Services. At one point, we lost all the staff. Like, there's an ongoing issue there. We had lost some staff and then pretty much everything. We had to turn over everybody, so we have new leadership there. And I would just say from the youth justice, there's CPS, which is a little bit different than youth justice. That was, I think, being handled, but youth justice was not being addressed. That's more like the juvenile offenders. There was frustrations with our law enforcement. And so I think we have people in there now that are addressing some of these cases that were not. There was no referrals coming from Health and Human Services to the DA's office. So now we're having those.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the increase is because people are doing what they're supposed to be
Doing their
doing.
job, yes, making sure the kids are getting taken care of.
Mhm. Yeah, we're identifying them now.
We used to house them here and that went away,
Right.
which made the price go up.
So then you can see the third column, surplus deficit, is just how we ran versus budget for each of those years too. You can see it's an escalating shortfall. And then the next little chunk there is total contracted. So that's all of our contracts in HHS. It's the youth justice, it's mental health, plus whatever else we have. So you can see that's been escalating too, except for, we had the couple years, 21 and 22, where we had a lot of contracts for out-of-county placements for adults. That dropped in 21, and then the youth stuff picked up in 23. Dropped in 22, I should say. And then it picked up in 23 and 24 with the youth taking over some of what wasn't going out for the adult placements. And again, I did that against budget and showed an overall surplus or deficit. So this isn't new. In 2020, we had a huge overall deficit in contracted, and that was due to the adult out-of-county placements. That's where then the next year there was a general fund surplus that was sent to HHS to cover that deficit from that year. Then we had a really good year in 22.
Wait, but are we budgeting more for each? Oh, it's going up anyway.
We are. The problem is we don't have the revenue stream for the expenses that we need. So that's where, like Andy said, I'm starting to meet with HHS monthly now, and, we're going to start looking at everything. If we have duplication of services or whatever we can, first you want to start with seeing if there are unnecessary expenses. And you want to maximize grants, make sure you're getting all of the grant money you should. You want to make sure you're billing out to all of the Medicare, Medicaid you can. And you want to seek new grants, not just to get money, but grants that fit in with what you're already doing. Because chasing money doesn't work, because the grants usually don't cover the expense, and then oftentimes you get 100% one year, year two you get 50%, and then it's gone. Well, now you have an expense with no revenue. So it's got to fit what we're doing so it makes sense. And then, last resort is you look at a levy increase for HHS.
Yeah, we want to make sure they're spending what they're supposed to, so we don't get Doge.
No, I think he is Doge for Sawyer County. That's what I'm hearing. If he's helping them figure out
Well,
how to
I would
balance
say that, but you always want to be efficient.
which is a great GOAT effort. Good job. Way to
Goat.
Lots of acronyms.
I got that.
go.
I think the other thing beyond the financials, you've heard a little bit about some of the things the county did in the adult area when you had a high jail population, and
Mhm.
you're starting, they've gone out and got the grant funds this last year to start some youth diversion work. truancy, staff, LTEs, to start addressing some of the problems that were not being addressed. It's a long-term process. You're not gonna flip the switch, but, truancy is a big one because we think that was, say, being ignored, but was not a high priority, but that's where you can identify some of those problems earlier so that you're not down the road and having to have kids go to Lincoln Hills or other facilities.
Yeah, I've always got a heartburn with that one, why truancy has been not a big issue. Really, it is a big issue, with all these kids going to school.
It's a big issue for the school too, so.
Right.
And they kind of, I
It's
mean,
kind of like what the judge was saying. Over that, if they don't.
Your
go to
mic's
school-
not on.
These kids aren't going to school, they're gonna end up over yonder and have, nothing in life. Thanks.
It's like Andy mentioned, sometimes you have to make an investment that makes things worse for a little bit to get better down the road. And that's similar to why you have a wellness program. It costs a little more on the front end, but the idea is down the road, you have healthier staff and spend less on health services. All right, so then moving on, the other thing I put in here is budgeted salaries and benefits for HHS. And that's an area where we've typically run a surplus, and that's because we typically have several unfilled positions throughout the year. So I just wanted to show that on there. And then I did throw in Medicaid because we had a drop in revenue this year. So that's why, where I say one of the things you want to do is make sure you're maximizing billing out everything you should. You don't want to bill out anything you shouldn't, but you maximize what you should be doing. And so that deficit jumped up this year. Luckily, it was offset between state aid and public health. They exceeded revenues, so it was kind of a wash. But we want to keep an eye on it and make sure we're billing things we should be. And I know that some of our stuff wasn't billed as timely as it could have been, so it's not going to get paid out until 25. So that's probably one thing we're looking at there. So then if there are not any questions or further questions on the top, we'll go to the second set of columns there. And if you want to scoot over, okay. So then I did expenditures versus budget expenditures. And that's where you can see, yes, we did up the budget. But as I also mentioned, the revenue stream doesn't necessarily follow that. But we did go over budget and spending in '24. And as I mentioned, we had a couple good years in a row spending wise. But the youth justice was much more than we had anticipated. And then you can look at the revenues there too. And the reason it looks like a drop in revenues, I didn't budget any fund balance draw or transfer for 25, just to show that there is a structural deficit. That's why I did it that way. There's been one for the last couple years, but I just wanted to show it separately there. So for 24, we had the structural deficit of 1.567, which we talked about earlier. And then the recommendation of transferring 1.3 million from the general fund, which there it is. It was 1.3 million in 22 that we did to cover that shortfall from previous years that affected their fund balance. And then a fund balance draw from HHS to make up that other 267,000 from 24. And then the budgeted 425 is drawing it from HHS fund balance, which if you go over one more spot, you can kind of track their fund balance. And as you can see in 21, they got really low before we did that transfer from surplus that year to put them up over 2 million. Plus they had a structural surplus themselves. So they had a really good year that year. And then last year was almost a break even. I actually put a little bit in for 23, and then 24 was a little bit rougher, and then 25 was rough too. So it is unsustainable. We're going to have to do something. One of the 4 things I mentioned earlier. probably some of each.
Anybody have questions before he moves on to child support? No? Thank you.
All right. Child support is another one that's fairly simple. We were a little under budget revenue wise for 24. Could be some coming in still, but it's not uncommon for them to be a little bit under. The expenses are almost right on, a little bit under at 97%. And for 25, we actually have received some state aid already, so we're ahead on revenues, and expenses are right on at 17%. Any questions with child support? And then the last thing we'll look at is our investment report. Couple changes from last month. We did purchase that CD that was approved, I believe at the January meeting. That was purchased at the end of January. And you can see all the interest rates there. Interest is down now. They've all come down. So we're looking really smart with the two CDs that we bought in 24. I did put the maturities of each CD there too. So the one we just purchased will mature in January of 26, the Franson one in May, and the PMA one in August. So we'll, at next month's meeting, I will probably have some things to look at or beginning to look at. We probably wouldn't purchase the CD until that one matures. Because we do have some, end of February was tight with our balances. So we can tie up the 9 million in CDs. I don't think we could do 12. We probably can't have any lapping of CDs. Franson, you can see we had a little less money, but fairly similar to a year ago. And then if you go down a little further, overall balances are very similar to what we've seen. But the January interest was down even from last month, definitely down from a year ago. So we're seeing the effects of interest rates coming down. Still carrying that ARPA that's committed but not expended. Opioid money we're spending, but we're getting some in too, so the numbers don't change a whole lot. There is some activity, even though the numbers don't change a lot. And the LATF is still sitting there. Local area tries, yeah.
Money that we received for federal government, at one time. It's a local area tribal consistency fund and tribal consistency fund. It's was a one-time disbursement, I think, out of the bill money. Right, it's one of the federal bills that was passed in the last couple of years, but it related to how much federal land we have.
So what can that be used for?
No restrictions on it.
Anything.
Okay, and then since the ARPA funds have to be used by this fall, what happens if those remain unspent? What can that go towards?
They're all allocated.
They're all allocated, we just haven't gotten the
There's
bill.
$100,000 there for BevCom and $100,000 for Nervado.
Yeah.
They just have not completed the project, so we haven't dispersed the funds yet.
Okay. And on those LATCF, since they don't have to go specific, why is it listed separate? Why don't we put it back in the general fund? You have to, okay, thank you for
And
clarifying.
it's a special pool of money that's one time that I don't usually like take one-time money and put it into ongoing expenses because then once that pool is gone, it's gone.
Mhm.
And you'd like to see some effect from it too. Since it was a one-time stream that we weren't expecting, like to have it have some impact, do something with it.
So it'll just sit there otherwise.
Yeah, we've got some things now in the works. At one time, we kind of set it aside and left it be. If we were gonna go with self-insurance for health insurance, we potentially thought that you're gonna wanna have a backstop, like a risk fund that could potentially fund that. I don't know if we're gonna need that, if you're gonna end up going that direction. There's also some things in the economic development world that you might be hearing a request for
Okay,
one time.
And that would be a great use for it.
Yeah, ideally, it'd be nice to put it into something like an economic development project where you put it in, then you get it back.
Yeah.
Put it in
Kind
the
of a
next project,
revolving
get it back,
fund
yeah.
right,
For startup costs or something.
sure. All right, thank you. Just for the general public, when they see that, I think it's helpful for them to know. Can you also, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but can you just do a summary of, because I think if the newspaper puts Sawyer County has a surplus, just like any other surplus, what is that for the general public to know what that surplus is being used for? It's not actually, like, we're not going to be starting to take requests from everybody for money, correct?
No, because after what you just approved today, the surplus is about $90,000.
Okay.
And that's not even settled yet because we do still have some stuff coming in.
Yeah, I like to be very,
you for that.
very blunt with, please don't send in your requests for stuff.
And while not ideal, and I know Mike probably doesn't like this part, I'd say most counties, it's not even fair to call it a surplus, because most counties are budgeting a portion of their general fund back into their budget the following year. So if you didn't have a surplus, you wouldn't have a general fund balance to pull money out of to balance the budget for the next year.
Right.
And just because of the way some of our monies come in, like stumpage and sales tax,
It's not reliable,
right.
Yeah.
You want to have that general fund balance to fill in every year.
right?
You had mentioned like, well, if we got extra money, people requesting. On the ARPA funds, ARPA was supposed to be used for, say, if somebody had issues during COVID, correct? And a business had issues during COVID? No?
They had access to their own ARPA funds
Oh.
through like the SBA. ARPA to the counties and the state was meant to offset the impact of COVID on the economy, like any reduction in revenues we have. So, and there, we can go into long detail, like if you're a bigger government entity, you had to detail the breakdown. Smaller units, depending how much money we had, we just have to report back that it was used to replace lost income.
Okay, good.
So like the examples that we used ARPA funds for were matching grants for broadband, so that if people were working from home during COVID, we used it for the helipad in winter for safety purposes, so things like that. But so people must still have requests out there, but they have to be closed this fall, I believe.
At one time,
We had to have it all obligated already, and you have to have it spent by the end of 26.
yeah, at one time, didn't we have some of it allocated for the new edition? And then
We did, yeah.
we changed that,
No, we use that,
and that's allowable.
yep, because you're expanding the space to make it safer for the people coming in. So there was safety purposes and capability purposes during
Sure.
that time. Yep,
Thank you, because
okay. Sure, so moving on, unless you have other things to,
That is the end of my report.
thank you for that. I really appreciate those reports to see how you're helping the different agencies within the county better service and be more responsible. All right, we have then, are we at 12? I'm sorry. Yes, we're at 12. Contracts for service with external organizations, discussion and possible action.
Yeah, no action today. I am just introducing this. I introduced it with the Extension and Economic Development Committee. So for some of our external agencies, Hayward Lakes Visitors Convention Bureau, the Sawyer County LCO EDC, Senior Resource Center, and the fair. I guess my recommendation where I'm heading is rather than, the budget process is the same. We get a budget request in July and then we work that into the budget, present it to the board for their decision on whether they want to fund them and what level that. But really, rather than just us saying, here's 50,000 to the Hayward Lakes, to make it a contractual relationship for services. So I emailed out, and we don't need to go into the details. It's a template contract for services. So in there, it has an appendix that says, Hayward Lakes is going to produce a visitor guide. They're going to market all Sawyer County communities. They're going to operate a visitor center. It's got a whole list of things they'll do. Same thing with the EDC. They're going to work with businesses. They're going to work with people coming in to locate a business. I borrowed and put together those lists from other areas, other So, but it's rather than appearing as if we're just giving a donation, we're actually paying them to do things that we're asking them to do.
That's you're giving those contracts out.
I'm proposing those 4 entities because Namacoggin Transit, we already have, like, we essentially own that. There's already bylaws and operating agreements, so we don't need a contract for that one.
The library is a state statute.
Libraries are state
Yeah.
statute, but the other ones, we really don't have any parameters. It's just, here's your money. The fair, we have a lease with them for the operating the grounds, but the money we provide is more for them to operate the fair. So we just have a contract saying, here's our allocation for this year. Here's the things we expect you to do. You're going to hold and I'm still working on the fair to find a list of how to word it, but we expect them to operate a 4-day fair. It's going to have youth activities, just some general bullet points. I'm not trying to change what they're doing, just that we put it in a contract. So if somebody says, why are you giving them money? Well, here's what. And then from the county standpoint, and I think good for the organizations too, that they know what the expectations are. But as you move ahead with them and it has provisions in there. If you want to add services or change services, you can do that. But you can review them annually and say, did you do these things that we have outlined in the contract? So I've given the EDC and Hayward Lakes draft contracts with my list of duties or services and asked them, we're going to get together the next couple of weeks and go through and revise those so they're comfortable with it too.
So currently you're looking at the 4.
Yep.
Is that gonna expand
Nope.
these
The
contracts?
only 4
That's
that we
only
would
4
have
really.
that are not state statute.
Yep. Senior resource, we already have a MOU with, so it's changing the MOU into a contract.
And of course, I have to ask, economic development, is there a contract with them?
That's
No,
what
that's
he just
one of
brought
them.
up, yeah.
Is it?
Yep, you've got the draft.
EDC, economic. development.
Yep, EDC.
So it'll help make the conversations better at budget time as well, because
Yep.
then we know the expectations the community will, and there shouldn't be such a debate at budget time then. So I think it's good all the way around. All right, so no action, just discussion. We're going to keep it on. We're going to
I
keep it
sent
on
you
the
the
agenda.
drafts for those 2. You can review them. If you have any comments, let me know.
All right, 13, correspondence reports from conferences and meetings. Anybody have anything that they've gone to that they want to share that would enhance finance? Okay. How about future agenda items? Anything you would like John to note to put on the agenda for next month? I don't know about you guys, but I really appreciate how Mike's broke it down by agency. So I think having that be reviewed and is awesome. So thank you. Thank you to our GOAT. Okay, all right. Yeah, all right. And so with that being said, I'll have a motion to adjourn. I don't need one, but I would like to play as a team here. Okay. All right, motion by Duffy, second by Howig. All in favor of adjourning? I like to be a team player, not just be like, we're adjourned, you're done talking, sorry. Only because I'm usually not done talking.
What are you gonna do if they don't want to adjourn yet?
Well, then we have 15 minutes till admin. We can